Apple just released new MacBook Pro, and as you can see, I am Russian, so I got one early on black market, and I am ready to give you my full review of it. I'm just kidding. But yes, Apple just did announce the new M4 MacBook Pro, the new M4 Pro MacBook Pro, and yes, the new M4 Max MacBook Pro. Apple's week of announcements continue, and I thought the MacBook Pro announcement was going to be the most boring one, but actually, it was as exciting as the rest of them because they actually gave us some surprise updates with this MacBook Pro, and they even gave an update to the MacBook Air by giving it 16 gigabytes of memory now. So the Mac lineup, the entire Mac ecosystem, it is eating good this week. This has been a fantastic week for the Mac, but let me tell you all about this new MacBook Pro and then give you some buying advice at the end of this video. So let's start with that base model MacBook Pro. So basically, Apple gave us a pretty big update with that base level model. It still comes in at $1,599, but like the rest of the M4 Max, it now comes with 16 gigabytes of memory as standard. And unlike some of the lower end Macs, Apple is putting 512 gigabytes of storage in this as well. So that base model right there is a pretty good combo. But what about the upgrades for that base level machine? Well, Apple decided to actually add an extra USB-C port on the side here. So now the base model MacBook Pro has 3 USB-C ports, just like the higher end versions. Now those are Thunderbolt 4 ports still. It does not get Thunderbolt 5, but yeah, another port on the side of the MacBook Pro. That is a huge win. And then they also get the same upgrades as the other MacBook Pros going forward, right? So it gets now the center stage camera in the webcam. Secondly, this was a surprise to me, is that Apple is increasing the brightness on these MacBook Pros pretty significantly. So yes, these were always HDR capable with the new Liquid Retina ProMotion displays, right? And they can get up to 1600 nits of peak brightness in HDR content. But what that meant was that only like a little portion of the screen could reach that 1600 nits of peak brightness. What they're now doing with SDR content, which means, you know, anytime you're using like an application, like when you open Final Cut or Safari or whatever you're doing, you can get up to 1000 nits of screen brightness. Now, apparently this is really only going to activate when it's outdoors and like extreme brightness, but that is significant. That's a huge increase over the last MacBook Pro models. Those got up to 600 nits of peak brightness. So these displays are very, very bright. If you use your MacBook a lot outdoors, this is going to be a really big upgrade. And then an even bigger upgrade on top of that, if you use your MacBook a lot near like windows or outdoors, is that there is now a new nano texture display option on the MacBook Pros for the first time. And thankfully, you can get this on every single MacBook Pro model, even the base model. The M4 base model also finally supports 2 external displays, even with the lid open, so no more workarounds where you had to close the lid on the M3 model. Oh, I forgot to mention, yes, the new base model does also now come in the space black color, so they're not even keeping that exclusive to the higher end 14 and 16-inch M4 Pro and M4 Max MacBook Pros. Now, what about the M4 Pro and M4 Max MacBook Pros? What exclusive upgrades does it get over that base model besides the chipset? Well, not much. Actually, the only noticeable upgrade on that system is that instead of the 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, it gets those new Thunderbolt 5 ports. So those are going to increase the bandwidth from 40 gigabits per second all the way up to 120 gigabits per second. And that is a big increase in speed. So if you plan on working with like some Thunderbolt 5 accessories in the future, maybe if you have to offload like a lot of video onto like an external storage device or something like that, that's going to be pretty beneficial moving over to Thunderbolt 5 when those accessories get released. And I don't want to make any, I don't want to give buying advice. It's hard, right? I feel like if you're maybe in the market for like a new Pro display in the future, those Thunderbolt 5 ports, I feel like are going to be necessary if you want like a 6K 120 hertz display. So if you plan on setting aside like $5,000 for an Apple display in the future, just keep that in mind when you're buying these MacBook Pros. And then obviously the chipset, right? So we saw the M4 Pro chip yesterday. That's coming to the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. It gets the same specifications as we saw on the Mac Mini, right? So it comes with 24 gigabytes of memory as standard. That is really awesome to see that base memory increase, not only on the lower end models with 16 gigabytes, but across the board on M4 Pro and M4 Max. And you're also getting up to a 14-core CPU on the M4 Pro model. And you can also get a 20-core GPU on the M4 Pro. But the big star of today is obviously the M4 Max. This is the first time we're seeing the M4 Max chip, and it sounds like a beast. So yes, you can get up to a 16-core CPU, which I believe is the same as the M3 Max. But yeah, M4 is more powerful in single-core performance, so that's going to lead to some significant gains in multi-core performance. And you can also still get a 40-core GPU, but again, GPU is stronger across the board, so it's going to lead to some pretty impressive gains there. The memory on the Max models is also 36 gigabytes as standard, so if you're upgrading that chipset, you even get more memory going along with that. And yeah, this sounds like a really powerful machine. I can't wait to see what the performance results are for the M4 Max. This is obviously going to be the most powerful Mac in existence now. It's going to be more powerful than the M2 Ultra Mac Pro. And that's going to be crazy to see. But in terms of overall upgrades, right? Like I mentioned yesterday, these are not revolutions with the Mac. These are small upgrades that add up to a nice difference. And when I look at these new M4s and how they're delivering value across the board, it reminds me of the M1 generation. You feel like you're getting a good value for your money here. And with the M2 and M3 generation, because it stayed with 8 gigabytes of memory for so long on a lot of these Macs, it didn't really feel like you were getting that much of a value out of it. But now with M4, it just feels like a really good time to buy a Mac. And hey, if you're looking to buy a Mac, which one should you get? Well, I wanted to mention one thing before I started talking about these MacBook Pros, and that is that the new, or well, I guess the old M3 MacBook Air also kind of got a little bit of an update today, and that's because the M3 Air now comes with 16 gigabytes of memory as standard for $1,100, and even the M2 MacBook Air, the one that's $1,000, comes with 16 gigabytes of memory. So if you're on the fence on whether you should get a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, and you're thinking, oh, MacBook Pro now comes with more memory, well, now the MacBook Airs also come with 16 gigabytes of memory. So again, it's a good time to buy any of these Macs. Specifically with the MacBook Pro, right? I think that base model is going to be a really good value. That M4 chip is supposedly more powerful than the M3 Pro chip from last year, even in that base model. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck there at $1,600. You're getting an additional Thunderbolt port on the side. You're getting 16 gigabytes memory as standard, 512 gigabyte hard drive. And of course, you can upgrade it from there, right? You can now get up to 32 gigabytes of memory on that machine. That is a competent pro level machine. And you can get up to 2 terabytes of storage. But yeah, that might not be enough Mac for most people. And I look at that M4 Pro chip and all the upgrades that got, and that does look like probably the best value if you are kind of like a pro power user and you want to save a little bit on money. Not only are you getting the upgraded Thunderbolt 5 ports, but you're also getting a jump up in memory to now 24 gigabytes as standard. And you get the 512 gigabyte drive as well. You do get a slightly weaker M4 Pro chip coming in at 12 CPU cores, and you get a 16 core GPU. So it is not going to be as powerful as the full-fledged M4 Pro chip, but still, when you look at that $2,000 price point, when you look at the specs on that machine, Thunderbolt 5 future-proofing yourself maybe for future Apple accessories, I feel like that's probably going to be the model I end up recommending to most people outside of that base M4 version. But then, yeah, you have a lot of options here when it comes to upgrades on the Mac. One upgrade I would say might be worth it is if you spend a lot of time outside or in bright environments, that nano texture display for just $150 more sounds like a good deal. We'll have to wait and see how that impacts how the display actually looks. But based on the reviews of the iPad Pro, I think it might be a nice upgrade to have because I'm pretty sure the coding is going to be very similar to that. And then what about stepping up even higher? Should you get like the upgraded M4 Pro chip, which does come with 2 more high performance CPU cores and 4 extra GPU cores? Well, again, if you're on a budget and $2,000, spending another $200, maybe that's not budget shopping, but in terms of pro use, it is kind of like budget shopping, right? I think that that upgrade might actually be worth it. Usually on the Pro CPU upgrades, I haven't been that favorable towards them because usually didn't get that much of a performance increase, but with 2 extra performance cores, I think that could be significant enough to warrant that performance increase on that machine. So if you know you're going to be using a lot of CPU and even a little bit of that extra GPU, that extra $200 on that machine might be the spec to get as like this mini monster pro machine. And then, yeah, going up from there, it starts to get a lot of money when you look at those Max machines, but you can spec these out with even more memory. If you need a lot of memory, if you need especially better GPUs and even CPUs, M4 Max, that's the one to go for if you're not worried about spending money. And you could spec that out up to 128 gigabytes of memory. I'm trying to keep this very generalized. I don't want to do like a really in-depth buyer's guide because it's supposed to like reach a huge audience here, right? And talking about like these upgraded Max chips, I mean, you can spec a MacBook Pro out to $7,000, and I feel like you need to wait for the full reviews on how those chips perform before you can actually recommend people go out and spend $1,000. But yeah, if you're a pro, if you're looking to spend a lot of money, you know who you are, and Apple can certainly spec those out pretty highly. 8 terabytes, 128 gigabytes of memory, 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU. You're looking at spending over $7,000 for those configurations. Just be careful when you're configuring these Macs. The M4 Pro can only go up to 48 gigabytes of memory. If you want to go higher than that, you need to get an M3 Max model. And depending on which chip you get, will limit the amount of memory you can put in on it. So like the base model M3 Max can only do 32 gigabytes. If you want to upgrade the memory, you've got to upgrade the chip too. So there's a lot of hidden costs here, to be honest with you. What about like battery life and stuff like that? One of the things I failed to mention in those upgrades, and I should have, is that the base model now comes with 24 hours of battery life. The M4 Pro version has 22 hours and the M4 Max on the 14-inch, but then that 16-inch gets 24 hours battery life as well because it just has that huge battery in it. So one of the reasons why you might want to go for the base model, again, is if you don't need a lot of performance, you can get 24 hours of battery life. That's 2 hours more than the M3 MacBook Pro. And then on, whether you're deciding between to go with like an M4 Pro, 14-inch or 16-inch, it's really about battery life and size, right? Do you want a big display? Well, the 16-inch is worth it. I've been using my 16-inch for a while. Sometimes I do miss the portability of the 14-inch, but I gotta say, you carry this in your bag, it's not too heavy. When you bring out that display, if you're doing any sort of video editing, photo editing, a lot of multitasking, things where you need a large display, even though it's a little bit more of a pain to carry around, once you set it up, you appreciate that extra screen real estate, and it looks gorgeous on this 120 hertz mini LED display. But the 14-inch, it is nice and compact, and it's still a powerhouse, which is also a really compelling option. So you kind of have to weigh price, number one. These are more expensive for the 16-inch models. It's about $200 more. And you also have to weigh battery life, portability, all those things to make that decision. But yeah, those are all the upgrades with the new M4 Pro and M4 Max and M4 MacBook Pros. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I hope it wasn't too much rambling. As you can tell, just really excited for this Mac week. It's been a fun week of announcements. I really like how Apple has done this, focusing on like one product every day. It helps me make these videos for you to focus on those products as well. So I kind of enjoyed this week instead of like a traditional event. I wonder if they'll keep doing this going forward. Let me know what you think. Have you enjoyed this week of Mac event announcements? What do you think about the new M4 MacBook Pros? Do you plan on buying one? Which spec do you plan on getting? Which spec do you think is the best value? And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more, including full reviews, better coverage with more details on these MacBook Pros, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everyone.